all of you for coming to our introductory session of this seminar on the Vedic science of philosophy, Vedic science of the mind, or Vedic philosophy of the mind. Can we have this technology, can we get it under control and stop all this, because it's very distracting for me. Okay? I just come here to speak on the subject, not to be a subject of clicking and worrying and flashing lights and all these kind of things. That's not why I'm here. So, psychology. The word psychology comes from not Sanskrit but Greek language, but the literal meaning of the word is very resonant with Vedic philosophy. The literal definition, if we look at the word psychology, is study or science of the soul, because in Greek the word psyche, from which we get psyche, psyche means soul actually. But the mind and the soul, as we will be explaining already in this introduction, are very closely related. So, and it is actually through the mind, through the purified mind, that we can come to know, to perceive the soul by direct perception. So, the Vedic scriptures give a very precise and very elaborate explication of psychology. And this is very, very important for us to know, since those of us gathered here are members either directly initiated into Krishna consciousness or members of the congregation which follows the process of Krishna consciousness. So, in Krishna consciousness, I've seen in this Krishna consciousness movement, in the many years that I've been practicing devotional service, I've seen two trends, or two sort of extreme trends with regard to psychology or the question of the mind. And one is one that we don't see so much anymore, which is, I think, a good thing. But in previous years we used to see more of. And this was an attitude that the mind is just Maya, and don't talk about it. You bring up questions of the mind, problems of the mind, that's just all illusion, and we should ignore the mind and just press ahead, follow Guru, Shastra, Sadhu, and if the mind gives any trouble, then it should be suppressed or kicked, or sometimes you hear beaten 100 times with a stick or something like that. This very sort of macho approach. So this is not in accordance with the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, actually. It all sounds very vigorous, very staunch and strong, but it is actually off the path of the real understanding of Krishna consciousness. We look in Bhagavad Gita, which is the basic book, and how many times Srila Prabhupada is writing about the mind in his purport. How many times the verses of the Gita spoken by Lord Krishna directly address the mind, directly point to the mind, and how the mind must be engaged in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada said that the Bhagavad Gita is basically telling us four things. There are four basic instructions, and if we follow them, then we will realize the full message of Gita. So the first of these four, which are found in 2 verses in the Gita, are manmana. Manmana means mind. So Krishna is saying, fix the mind on me. Manmana bhava madbhakto. And in this way become a devotee. Madhyaji, always worship me. Namaskuru, and be very humble, offering our obeisances to the Lord and His devotees. So of these 4 essential instructions of the Gita, the first directly mentions the mind and how the mind should be engaged. So the Vedic directives regarding the mind are not negative. Those who take a negative stance that the mind is to be ignored or kicked or whatever, as I say, this is off the track of our philosophy. This is leaning in the Mayavadi direction, impersonalist direction. Impersonalists and the extreme yogis and those kind of personalities, yes, they may try to suppress the mind and senses. But the Vaishnava philosophy is engage the mind. So this is one extreme, this attempt to totally repress the mind. And the other extreme that I've seen through the years, and this is more in recent times, is it seems to come out of a misunderstanding that Prabhupada's books don't really tell us too much about psychology, or the Vedas is not really a good source for psychology, and this is more leaning towards Western psychology. And Western psychology is a very unclear field. There are, from speaking to psychologists myself, persons educated in psychology of the West, there are at least 6 to 8 major different schools of psychology. This is very general to say 6 to 8. And there's no overarching doctrine or worldview that unites them. These are 6 or 8 different, totally different conceptions of what the mind is, how it works, and how we should deal with its problems. So once we start to, go to the self-help shelf of our local bookshop and take down those nice books that say about, tell you about how to understand your mind and what to do about your desires, etc., we start to enter into a jungle of different opinions and contradictions. And this means that we actually get into the mental plane. And this is not the goal of real psychology. As I say, if we take psychology, psyche, to mean the soul, we want to come to the position of the spirit soul and not go on floating in the mind aimlessly, this way and that way. Krishna speaks of the danger of this. Bahushakahi, he says the mind, uncontrolled mind is many, many branched and will just take us away from the determined application of consciousness in the right path. So this is also a wrong choice. So this represents 2 extremes. Trying to totally suppress the mind, and the other side totally irresponsibly indulge the mind in all of its whims and speculations. So, getting back to my main focus here, the Vedic psychology gives us a very clear, very systematic, and very complete picture of what the mind is, how it works, and how the mind is to be fixed. Because our mind, as we will see, the mind is actually the whole focus of the process of Krishna consciousness. The mind is our very reason for being in illusion, and at the same time, the mind is our very means of getting out of illusion. So once we understand the Vedic psychology of the mind, then we are equipped to make advancement in Krishna consciousness, to make real advancement, to cross over our conditioning, to cross over our bad habits, to cross over our ignorance, to cross over all of the weaknesses that we have inherited from having taken so many previous births, and also having this birth, the way we were brought up, all of the shortcomings of our present life. We can overcome this if we understand clearly what the mind is, how to engage it in the Lord's service. So another point I want to make in this introductory presentation is that although you have seen a schedule, and I do intend to follow generally that schedule, that progression of subjects, but I also want to leave plenty of time for questions and discussion. So for example, now today I'm just going to be introducing the seminar to you, going over key points, and at the end of this there'll be time for you to raise questions, and if I see that there's a great deal of interest and a great deal of need of further discussion, then we can carry over tomorrow with more discussion on what we've talked about today before going on to the next item. So this is the way I intend to proceed, kind of leaving room for clearing out any doubts that might arise. So as I said, we will follow that progression, but not necessarily day by day jumping to the next topic so strictly. We'll see how it goes. This subject of psychology, another introductory point, say beginning introductory, in the beginning of the beginning, is that this subject is also, it can be quite demanding on the intelligence. Because as you will see, Vedic psychology is actually, it turns out to be the most technical aspect of the Krishna conscious philosophy. All about the three modes of material nature, even about the stages of creation that you read about in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the teachings of Lord Kapila Dev, all that heavy stuff. This is Vedic psychology. These are the components of Vedic psychology, and how that is I will be explaining. So the whole point of this, of getting into this philosophy, this is helpful because the whole point of this, the whole point of philosophy and psychology is to culture detachment. You see, as long as we're caught in the little sphere of our obsessive thinking, then that means we're very much conditioned. But if we can get this higher perspective, philosophical perspective, this releases us from our obsessions. And in this way, as we're released, we're coming up to liberation. And so this is essential to deliberate on this philosophy. So I want you all to understand that from the very beginning, that what I'm going to be presenting in these days, it may be a little bit rough going, as far as the intellect is concerned. But I'm going to take pains to present this in clear language and to try to make sure that everyone understands. But I need your cooperation. You have to want to understand. And then we'll have a nice reciprocation here. You have to be trying to understand. Yes, and another point, beginning point, is I had mentioned already, discussion. So I want to beg all of your cooperation, you see, because in this type of subject, when we talk about psychology, problems of the mind, and furthermore problems in our relationships with other persons and their minds interacting with our minds, I have a lot of experience, particularly within ISKCON, within our ISKCON society, which is sometimes a very unique sort of society. So there's a temptation in gatherings as this for participants to want to bring forth in the assembly their own particular problems, or their own problems with other persons. And they ask questions that appear to be just general philosophical questions, but as you listen to the question unfold, you start to realize that this person is talking about himself and another person who might be right here in the room also. Sometimes couching the question in such a way, like, sometimes we see among devotees, blah, 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 blah. Or sometimes they don't even bother to do that. I have a problem with this guy over here. Well, I'm going to kindly ask you to please, if you really have such a burning problem, we can talk about that, more privately. If you feel you must discuss this with someone, I'm open to that, but not here, please, not in this assembly. Because these kind of loaded questions, they just change the whole atmosphere, and it tends to derail the proceedings. So, if such questions come, I'm going to remind you of what I've said now. I'm saying it now, so that later on, when I tell you, no, that's not the kind of question I want to hear, you'll have already been warned. You won't be able to complain. That doesn't mean that I'm utterly rejecting such a kind of question, but this is not the forum for it. We could talk about it privately if you feel that it's very important. All right, so the first thing I want to do is read. This is a very few sentences from two purports by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So the first purport is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, verse 31. Srila Prabhupada writes, "Since mind is a product of the mode of goodness, if it is fixed upon the Lord of the mind, Aniruddha, then the mind can be changed to Krishna consciousness. It is stated by Narottam Das Thakur that we always have desires. Desires cannot be stopped. But if we transfer our desires to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is the perfection of life. As soon as we desire to transfer, as soon as the desire is transferred to lording it, as soon as the desire is transferred to lording it over material nature, it becomes contaminated by matter." And the second purport, this is actually just one sentence I'm going to read from a second purport, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 28, verse 7. "The essential point is that the mind, which is contaminated by material attraction, has to be bridled and concentrated on the Supreme Personality of Godhead." Now, from these few sentences taken from the aforementioned two purports, I have extracted these 5 points that you see on the board, which are the topics of today's session, this introduction to our seminar in psychology. So the first of the 5 points is that the essential substance of the mind. First, this is the first thing, that the mind is insubstantial. It's not just puff of smoke or a ghost, but it has substance. And what is the substance? The substance of the mind is the sattva guna, the mode of goodness. You may ask yourself, what is the mind? You see? What is it made of? This is the answer. It is made of the sattva guna, the mode of goodness. And this mode of goodness, this sattva guna, is the energy of Lord Aniruddha. Now, I am not going to, in this introduction, go into a complete explanation of Lord Aniruddha. That is coming. That is certainly coming. As I said, the philosophy will be very much expanded here, and you're going to find all about Aniruddha, Pradumna, Shankarshan and Vasudeva and their role in Vedic psychology. This is very, very important. But right now, we will just say, as we heard from the purport, that Lord Aniruddha is the Lord of the mind, and he is present within everyone's heart as the Paramatma. So this mind energy is the energy of Paramatma, Super Soul himself. And so Prabhupada is stating here that in the second point, as we see, we've heard in the purport, that when this sattvic mental substance is dedicated to the Lord, it is transformed, because sattva guna is still material. So it becomes transformed, Srila Prabhupada said, into Krishna consciousness. That material mind, substance of sattva guna, becomes spiritual, becomes the consciousness of Krishna. And this Krishna consciousness, and again this is something which will be elaborated in sessions to come, is the state of infallible goodness, non-material goodness, which is above the three modes of material nature. Just as a hint of things to come, that state is called Turiya in Sanskrit, which literally means the fourth stage. There are three modes of material nature, but there is a fourth transcendental stage. And when we apply the mind, dedicate the mind to Krishna, the mind becomes transformed from something that is material to something that is transcendental. Third point, and this is a question will naturally come up. All right, so you've said we should dedicate the mind. What does that mean? So, the mind, and I will be talking about that more in this very session. The mind is actually the storehouse of our desires. So, to dedicate the mind to the Lord, it means we have to channel the flow of our desires toward His lotus feet. So, there's no question of, quote, controlling the mind or fixing the mind or pacifying the mind without reformation of desire. You see, this is key. This is key to the whole process of Vedic psychology. You see, in the West, they have this comfortable illusion that you don't have to change your desires. You see, you just lay on the couch, as some of these psychological processes do. You lay on the couch and you tell us about your mother and father and all these things. And then when you get off the couch, then you go back living your life as you were living it before. And somehow the psychologist, by hearing, or psychiatrist, by hearing you tell about mother and father and all these things that happened when you were very young, he gives you a few advices, and you're somehow going to be able to adjust your mind and be a better person and be, more balanced, etc., etc. No, sorry. This is not going to work. we have to directly address our desires, and not suppress them, but address them, recognize them, and channel them towards the lotus feet of Krishna. So our quality of mind, when we talk of quality of mind, it simply means quality of desire. So fourth point, the original condition of the mind, and this original condition in Srimad Bhagavatam, and the verse I will be telling you about later, not in this session, that original quality is called tattva, which means reality. So the reality of the mind is that it is Krishna consciousness. The real truth of the mind is that it is the energy of the soul. That's all. It is our consciousness. But something has happened to that consciousness. What has happened? That our desire, which is carried by consciousness, our desire is now flowing towards matter, towards lording it over matter. That is our problem. And so, the material mind, which is clearly analyzed in Bhagavad Gita as a material thing, again, it's the material mode of goodness, sattva guna. In essence, the material mind simply means the condition of material attraction. So we can all, this is very valuable. You see, we can all right now look at ourselves, look into our own hearts, and we can understand, we can see, if we're honest with ourselves, our attractions to matter. And this means attractions to the three modes of material nature. So that attraction itself, that is the mind, what we mean by material mind. That tendency to take shelter in the material nature. So, now, having introduced these 5 points, we're going to go through them. So the mind is the energy of the super soul. And the functions of this energy, what are they? Thinking, imagination, visualization, concentration, emoting, feeling emotions, attraction, repulsion. All of these are mental activities. And they are real movements. They are real movements of a real energy. In Bhagavad Gita it is affirmed that the mind is one of the eightfold material energies of the Lord. So this energy, this mental energy, these movements of mental energy, they are very complex. And that is why the subject of psychology seems to be so difficult. Today, Padmasambhava Prabhu took me to this bookshop. What is it called again? Hard to Find. Yeah. So I was just looking through it. And upstairs, I went up some stairs, and I came to a section of philosophy and then psychology. The psychology was big shelf from top to bottom, from ceiling to floor. So many books. And I was looking in the books, and there was primal scream therapy. I don't know if anyone does that anymore, but you're supposed to become better adjusted by just letting go and screaming your lungs out. And so many different schools and doctrines of psychology. And so obviously this is a very, very complex subject matter. And as you were telling me, because you touch on these in your seminars that you give to business people, These theories of the mind are always changing. Like a few years ago, it was in vogue. There was very much talk about this left brain, right brain. You see, like one is more masculine, one is more feminine, etc. And you know, I found among devotees that because we're kind of out of these things, we're not directly involved with these kinds of books. So these things sort of drift into ISKCON, and they remain in ISKCON for longer than they remain in the material society. So some of you may be thinking, oh yeah, left brain, right, I know about that, yes. Well, you know, that's passé already. That's already, they've already moved beyond that. So if you want to start asking me questions about left brain, right brain, or something like that, you know, that's already gone. Ancient history. That's paleontology, not psychology. Paleontology means the study of ancient past. They've already moved beyond that, and they've got new theories. So these theories are always changing. So this speaks of the complexity of the study of the mind. So we need to know, why is it so complex? These different movements of the mind are there, and they're branching in so many directions, and they intertwine and combine and appear in new ways. Why is it so complex? And there's a simple answer at the bottom of that complexity. And the simple answer is that the mind is moving according to our desires. So it's our desires that make mental functions so complicated. And why is that? Because we don't even know what our desires are. We have only a very, very superficial perception of what we want and what we don't want. So I'm going to speak more on that today, but I just want to touch on that. See, these desires are bubbling up in the mind, and we only have a very scant perception of them. The desires are always cooking on different levels. And so the mental functions are very, very complex. So, the movements of the mind have physical effects that we know. That's obvious. If in my mind, the desire manifests for a drink of water, then there's a physical effect. My hand reaches over and picks up this cup and lifts the water to my mouth. That's a physical effect of a mental conception. And so these mental movements, they're behind all of our activities in this body, and they even extend further into the world around us, the field of our activities in this world. So people take this, they look at this and they understand, yes, the physical is moved by the mental. And so you get these ideas of mind over matter. And this comes into some forms of yoga, that all we have to do is really grab hold of the mind and force it according to our will, and then all of our problems on the physical plane will be solved. Or what this you were saying, you were telling me this slogan, fake it
You'll make it.
and you'll make it. Yeah.
Until you make it.
Fake it until you make it. In other words, you visualize your goal, what you want, and you just keep thinking about it, and it's going to happen. So this all sounds very easy, but there's a spanner in the works, and that again is our desires. See, desires, as we will be learning in the days to come, there are different, we're speaking of mental movements, so there are different levels of mind, you see. So there is the surface mind. You're all in your surface mind right now, aware of what your senses are telling you. You're hearing what I'm saying. This is surface awareness. But beneath that, there is what is known, Prabhupada used this word. And I'm going to be explaining this very scientifically according to the Vedic explanation in days to come, not now. I'm just going to use this simple word which you all undoubtedly heard, and I'm reminding you Prabhupada used it, subconscious. So there's a deeper level of mind which goes in English language by the name of subconscious. And so our desires are rooted down there. You know, subconscious, you can compare it to the cellar, basement of a house. So in the basement of a house, you've got many things stored which you don't normally use. And you even forget that they're there. You put them there, but you forget that they're there. You're not thinking of them all the time. But sometimes they're brought up. You use them. Sometimes you go down there and you look and you, what is all this junk? You didn't realize that so much of this junk had piled up, and you oh no. So the mind is also like that. There's a basement. There is the subconscious, and there is stored, literally, this is not an exaggeration, unlimited desires. And these desires are always percolating, and they pop up. I can read, because often people, you see, they start acting in a certain way, and then a bad result happens, and they complain, I never wanted this. You see? But how do you know what you want? You say you never wanted this, but you acted in such a way that this thing happened. You may not have consciously wanted this, but as I say, our desires are there on different levels. In our surface mind, we think we know what we want, but underneath, in the basement, they're unlimited desires, and they're cooking away. So Srila Prabhupada, from a 1974 Srimad Bhagavatam lecture, he states this: just like in the water, in a pond, sometimes you will find all of a sudden one bubble comes from within. Pot! This means that the dirty things are within, stocked. So again, imagine a mirror-like surface of a nice pond with lotus flowers, looking very beautiful. But if you stand by the edge of the pond and watch, you may see after some time, for no apparent reason, some bubbles bursting up, disturbing the surface. So that's coming from deep within the pond itself. There is some rotting vegetation, some debris, something at the bottom. And because it is spoiling, therefore, gases are created and they come to the surface. So this is a very, very nice analogy that Srila Prabhupada has given. We have our surface mind, you see, and yes, especially because we're following this sadhana of Krishna consciousness, we try to keep in good association, we restrict our activities, we do not engage in overtly sinful activities, we try to keep the mind away from such thoughts. So it is not that difficult for us to create a very placid looking surface mind, like the mirror surface of a nice pond. It's not all that difficult by engineering our association and our what we do and what we don't do, what we think, what we don't think about. You can make the surface of your mind very, very clear and smooth, but then suddenly from within, bloop, 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 all kinds of things come up which we don't want to own, but no, it's down there in your basement. You see, in previous lifetimes, who knows when, we have stored those things away, and they're cooking. And so the mind that we try to engineer to keep very peaceful does become disturbed all by itself. And that disturbance is coming from desire. That is the disturbing factor. The desires that are stored away. So, this rising of desire bubbles, this unexpected bursting of the subconscious into our surface awareness, demonstrates that our mind is capable of reproducing any type of single impression that you have ever experienced. We want to understand the mind and how powerful it is. Look at this, you see. Things that we did a long time ago, the mind suddenly brings forward, pushes right into our face. And you're re-experiencing everything. Not just in thought, but actually the senses themselves are getting, at least subtly, that taste again. You see, if you think back to the first time in this lifetime, as a child, if you can remember that first time that you ever ate an orange, you see, your mother put in your hand this wonderful, round, orange-colored fruit, and she showed you how to peel away the skin. Tangerine maybe is better, because it's easier to peel for a child. So, tangerine. And I can remember that. So, it was a Christmas, and my mother gave me a tangerine. And so, put my thumb into the skin and peel it back, and then that smell comes, that tangy, zesty smell. And then furthermore, after you've peeled it, you break open the segments of the fruit. And again, the smell. And already you start to taste it, even before you put it to your mouth. It's so strong. And then you put it to your mouth, and this wonderful taste floods your senses and your mind. So when we, you can regenerate that experience by contemplation. And sometimes the mind by itself, as this example of the bubbles bursting, sometimes the mind by itself is just thrusting these things into our face. And you see, in the storehouse, the subconscious basement of the mind, it's not only all the experiences that we've had in this lifetime, but all lifetimes. Srila Prabhupada said the mind, this was, I remember, one of the first things I learned as a new devotee listening to Srila Prabhupada's lectures. He gave the example of the mind as a spool of photographic film, endless. And so, all of the things that we've been doing in all of our lifetimes, whether in human form or other form, it's like click, 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 click. And that spool is recording, and it's still there. It's still there, everything. So it is possible in this lifetime for the mind to draw experiences from previous lifetimes and bring them up. And this is what is going on in our dreams. This is what dreaming is all about. We've told you about the bursting of the subconscious into the conscious mind. That happens also when we're awake. This happens also by imagination. You let your imagination flow, and this is what happens. Then these hidden impressions from below start to come up. You see, and this is a regular experience we're having every night. And I'm going to go into this in much more detail later on. But every night when we sleep, we go through 2 stages of consciousness, which are also admitted by Western psychology: dreaming sleep and unconscious sleep. So the technical words are svapna in Sanskrit for dream sleep, and susupti for the unconsciousness, the dreamless sleep. So in our dream sleep, then our mind is no longer accessing the senses. You see, when we're dreaming, of course, the eyes are closed. So what are we going to see? The body is lying inert. It's not. So the senses are suspended. But we're having experiences nonetheless, because the mind is accessing this deep memory, this subconscious memory. And so things that we've experienced before, they're coming up into the mind. Things that we've experienced, and even things that we have not experienced directly, because in the dream sleep, the mind combines different experiences to create new flavors. And Srila Prabhupada gives the example of, you have experienced gold. Everyone has seen gold at least seen a photograph of gold in those colorful advertisements they have in the glossy magazines. Gold Rolex or something. But most people have, they see, here you can see gold. I have a gold ring with a yellow sapphire in it. Pushkaraj gem. So anyway, gold we have experienced, and mountains we have experienced. You have the Southern Alps in your country. So very tall mountains. So those experiences are there, certainly recorded in the mind. And the mind is able to extract these two and combine them so that in your dream you see a golden mountain. Now you've never perhaps ever seen a real golden mountain. Mount Sumeru is said to be a gold mountain, but whether or not we've ever seen Sumeru in its totality, that's a good question. So if we haven't, still we can have the impression of a gold mountain presented to us by our mind, by this combination. So this is what is happening in dreams. Mind is combining, willy-nilly most of the time. Most of the time our dreams are just random concoctions. Sometimes they have meaning. Please don't ask me about that today. We'll talk about that later. I know everyone wants to know about that, but be patient. So, but this is the basic function of dream. It's the intercourse between the subconsciousness and the conscious mind. So, the mind, therefore, in this basement part, the subconscious part, is the storehouse of all of our experiences, and that means all of our desires, because our desires are all linked to these experiences, to these objects of our experience, which are stored in the memory. So there's a verse, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, Text 21, Mayamana Shrajati Karmayam Baliyaha Kalena Chorita Gunano Matena Pungsa Chandomayam Yat Ajayarpita Surasharam Samsara Chakram Ajako Chicharet Tvad Anyaha. And this means, O Lord, O Supreme Eternal, by expanding your plenary portion, you have created the subtle bodies of the living entities through the agency of your external energy, which is agitated by time. Thus the mind entraps the living entity in unlimited varieties of desires to be fulfilled by the Vedic directions of karma kanda, fruitive activities, and the 16 elements. Who can get free from this entanglement unless he takes shelter at your lotus feet? And Srila Prabhupada, in his word-for-word translation to this verse, again, 7.9.21, he marks the word mana, mind, with an asterisk. And in the footnote, he states, the mind is always planning how to remain in the material world and struggle for existence. Very apt definition of material mind. It's that aspect of our consciousness which is always planning to stay here, which is always thinking of this material world as home. That is your mind. You see? Someone asks you where you live, and you give your address, such and such number of some such street and some such section of Auckland. That's my home. That's your mind speaking. That's your mind is identifying with that material place as home. And in the home we struggle. We struggle to pay our bills, we struggle to cook the food, we struggle to keep things clean, we struggle to keep our family members happy, we struggle to keep up with the Joneses next door. That is all the mind, you see. So Srila Prabhupada writes that this is the business of the mind. It is the chief part of the subtle body, which consists of mind, intelligence, and false ego. Now, this is important. Because when I'm talking about the mind psychology, you see there is this, we find in Prabhupada's books, the mind is, the word mind is sometimes used in a very specific sense, mana, a specific aspect of the subtle body. And sometimes the mind is referring to the linga sharira, subtle body in toto, which includes the false ego, ahamkara, and buddhi, the intelligence. So generally when I'm speaking of the mind, I'm speaking of the linga sharira. Because as we will see, the mind is, its functions are intimately connected with the intelligence and with the false ego. So we can't get very far in understanding the mind separately from intelligence and false ego. So generally when I'm talking of mind, I'm talking about the subtle body as a whole. So this is important. But Prabhupada says, the mind, mana, is the most important, is the chief aspect of the subtle body. Because, why? Because the mind is the repository of our desires. This is an important distinction if you want to know the difference between mind, intelligence, false ego. Mind is the place where all the desires are. And it's the desires that are keeping us here in this material world. If you have read Srila Prabhupada's books carefully, then you will know that the reason we are undergoing samsara, repeated birth and death, is simply because we are continuing trying to satisfy our material desires. A person, when he leaves this body, if he is not satisfied, if he feels that, oh, I didn't do this, oh, I didn't attain that, or if he feels I'm losing this, I'm dying, I'm leaving my wife, I'm leaving my children, leaving my home, if these kind of thoughts are on his mind, that means his material desires are still active. That means his consciousness is still centered on these material desires, and therefore he'll take birth again. So it's these desires that are bringing us back to this material world. And the desires are rooted in the mind. So it is not possible at this stage for us to know what all our desires are. We're only able to perceive desires that are overt, that are obvious. You see, I'll give you an example. I have a good friend who lives in Mayapur, Dham. His name is Murari Gupta Prabhu. He lives in a village just next to our Mayapur complex in Tarunpur. And so he's a family man. He's very good grihasta, because he has his own land, cows, he grows his crops, he protects cows. He's an Englishman by birth. He lived in Australia for a while. You may know him, some of you. He has an Indian wife, and he has 3 sons and 1 daughter, and his daughter Sudevi is the youngest. So once he was telling me about his children, and so he had 3 sons first, and that he said, so after 3 sons you start to think you know about children. But then we had Sudevi, daughter. And he said this was a whole new phase, a whole new chapter, a little girl. And so he was telling me how she's, even at age 2, 3 years old, she's very particular about how she dresses. Of course, she can hardly dress herself. Her mother has to dress her. But Sudevi is insisting, I will wear this, but not this, not this, and this combination. He said, my boys, they never, any old thing, old t-shirt, pair of short pants, doesn't matter. You see, just go out and play. Clothes is at the bottom of their list of considerations. But Sudevi, even at age 2, it's like number 1, first thing, you have to be nicely dressed, then I go out. And so in so many ways he was saying how different she is from the boys. And so this is a clear indication of a somewhat different, special set of desires that are already manifesting in this little person at age 3, you see. So these kind of things, they're obvious. That, women tend to be more particular about their appearance than men. That's a pretty obvious thing. But we have unlimited desires. And if we could see these desires, we would be shocked. Because, these desires have been enacted in when we were in various of the 8,400,000 species of life, crawling on the bottom of the ocean on segmented legs. And so in those kind of forms, then certain desires, which in this assembly would be totally unmentionable, they're prominent, they're right there in the forefront, at the top of the list, you see. Just like Sudevi's number one is to be dressed nicely, even at age 2 or 3. So there are these overt desires, but we have so many desires hidden away. And they're so underground that mostly they get their chance to come out only when we sleep again, in dreams, as I've explained. But they're always there, and they're always pushing, cooking, bubbling underneath, and affecting us in different ways. Sometimes people, you get into a situation with another. This is actually one of the great tests of our advancement in Krishna consciousness, since our philosophy is personal. So the real test of how much we've realized the philosophy is seen in the quality of our personal relationships. And, sometimes our neophyte status is really exposed. You get into a situation with another person, and somehow it becomes intense, and nobody really wants it to become intense, but it just becomes intense. And then you start saying things in the heat of the moment that you normally would never say. And they just start, these, vituperations start pouring out of the mouth. And then later you feel very bad. And you may even say, I wasn't myself when I said that. And this is a clear indication of the difference between us and the mind. The mind, yes, is the storehouse of these desires. And in different situations, the desires, they're always, there's always pressure from them. And different situations, they can burst out in such a form. And then we're embarrassed. That wasn't me. That's not me to say such bad things to another person. Huh? But those are our desires. You see, they're there underneath, and they're always looking for a way to come out. And so they do. They take whatever chance they can. So this is our situation, and that this is the, the great crisis of psychology. We talk about repression and all these things, these desires there trying to come to the surface. We're trying to keep them down, trying to be respectable ladies and gentlemen, and and some people, and that tension is called neurosis in Western psychology. And so everyone has that. So, as I say, it's not practical for us, although there's some Western psychological process. They do try for this. You lay on the couch and you try to, the doctor wants to hear everything, whatever desire you ever had. What are you thinking now? Stop for a moment and imagine something. What is that? Look at this ink blot. Tell me what you see. And you're embarrassed to tell him what you see. No, tell me what you see. In this way, they try to expose all the desires. But actually, in Krishna consciousness, this is not recommended. It's not a recommended process. So, what we should begin with in Vedic psychology is the assumption that our basic desire, basic meaning material desire, the one that brought us to the material world, is to enjoy and to control, or in other words, to be God. So to accept that about ourselves is actually the beginning of transcendental psychology, because it's the beginning of detachment. If we realize that this is the real force underneath all of our desires. Like Krishna says in 16th chapter, Ishwaroham aham bhogi. Ishwaroham, I want to be controller. Aham bhogi, I want to enjoy. Now, the 16th chapter is called the divine and demoniac nature. And this particular verse that begins Ishwaroham aham bhogi is describing the quality of the asuras. So that we have to be ready to admit about ourselves, that you see down there, deep in the heart, the root of our mind, there is an asura. And that is asura. Let's look at this word for a moment. When we hear the word asura, we may think of a little green or red fellow with his pitchfork and pointy ears and slanty, sharp eyes and big teeth. Typical image of a demon. But actually, our great Acharya, Madhva, Sripad Madhvacharya, he has explained asura as composed, it's rooted in asun, which means this life, and ramate, to enjoy. So anyone who wants to enjoy this life is asura. And that's literally what the word means. One who is dedicated to enjoy this life, this body, he's an asura. And naturally the demons, that is their philosophy, isn't it? To enjoy this world, this life. This, Prabhupada used to say, this spot, it's like a spotlight on an otherwise dark stage. This is your life. Do you remember there was a TV show, This is your life. It's a one spot. At this time, this place, for these few moments, this is your life. And we latch onto that. I'll enjoy this. That's an asura. So this is at the heart of our present fallen psychology. And this is what we have to come to accept. We don't need to root through our desires in specific, try to see them, bring them out. That is premature to try to do that. As I will explain later on, there does come a stage when all of the desires are manifest before us. I'm not going to talk about that more today, just to dangle something in front of you so that you'll come back on another day. We'll be talking about that later. When actually one does realize all of those desires, sees them, everything at once. Yeah, very interesting. But for now, because that stage is beyond us, now we just need to know this, that the force behind all of our desires, this is Ishwara Hamma Bhogi. I want to control, I want to enjoy. In other words, I want to be God. And so, the process of Bhakti Yoga is specifically aimed at rectifying that. So, to rectify this fallen state of consciousness, which, by the way, you find this fallen state is expressed in so many songs by great Vaishnava acharyas. So you need not feel ashamed, you need not torment yourself. Oh, I'm a demon. Look at the songs of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Gopinath, for example, very beautiful song. So read those verses in the song Gopinath, how he's expressing. He's also declaring himself to be a demon. Narottam Das Thakur, Hari Hari Bipale Janama Goinanu, Manusha Janama Jar. He's saying, I have taken this human birth, but what have I done? Instead of worshipping Radha Krishna na bhai jiya. I did not worship Radha and Krishna. Instead, I drank the poison of sense gratification. Even knowing that it's poison, I drank it. Even though I'd been warned, don't take this poison, still I took it. This is the madness of lust. You see, we learn. This everyone, we're warned as little kids, don't smoke, but everyone has to try it out. And it's poison. All of this is poison. It's called intoxication. And the root word is toxic, which means poison. Toxic waste. That's what cigarette smoke is. It's toxic waste. And we draw it into our lungs and go, a pause that refreshes. So this is, we've all done this. And the Vaishnava, their great acharyas are pointing this out, that this is the fallen state of consciousness. So we have to admit, recognize. This is, even in Western psychology, they say like this. You have to first of all admit and recognize our weaknesses. So this we should do. And then we have to apply the process of bhakti. And there are, in dealing with the mind, we can say that there are two basic methodologies, two basic procedures. One is positive and the other is negative. We've actually already heard this from Srila Prabhupada. I'll go back to read these opening quotations. Yes, this again from Srimad Bhagavatam 3:28-7. The essential point is that the mind which is contaminated by material attraction has to be bridled and concentrated on the Supreme Personality of God. So bridled, you know this word, like you bridle a horse, has to be brought under control. This is the negative aspect. So in yoga, this is called yam niyam, do's and don'ts. Or in Bhakti Yoga specifically, vidhi nisheda. So nisheda means the negations, the don'ts. Don't do these things. So the mind is brought under restriction. You cannot go wherever you want. You can only go this path, not this way, that way. So this is one side of it. The mind must be bridled. And then the positive side is that the mind must be concentrated on the personality of Godhead. And so we have all of the ninefold processes: hearing, chanting, remembering. And these first three, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, are the most prominent of the nine, most essential for gaining, for purifying the mind and directing the mind to Krishna. To hear, to chant, and in this way, having developed this resonance of hearing and chanting, we can remember Krishna. So, Srila Prabhupada also says the same concentration, concentrating the mind by positive and negative processes, can be achieved by other recommended processes. And therefore, anyaischa, other methods, can also be applied. So, this is also good to know, that in certain cases, we may even go apparently outside of the strict ninefold processes of devotional service. Because the Vedic philosophy, the Vedic culture, the Vedic civilization, the whole Vedic scheme of civilization is presenting a whole field of activities which is in the mode of goodness. So there are many options there if they are needed. For example, I want to bring this, I'm speaking in a little abstract sense, so let me bring this to a real concrete example. An example is astrology. Actually, what astrology is, it's a form of psychology. Because Vedic astrology is analyzing, with reference to our natal chart, the position of the sun and moon and stars under which we were born, is actually analyzing the structure of our mind. And the influences, the subtle influences that will be prominent in our mind. And this is the result of our past karma. So astrology is a kind of, when done properly by a good astrologer, it's a kind of psychoanalysis, actually. You find out, and I may recommend Banu Maharaj, who comes here. He's the best Vedic psychologist I know. I'm not an astrologer by any means, so please don't ask me any questions about that. I can generally talk about it, but I don't practice that. But he's the best Vedic astropsychologist. So if one feels that he or she needs that, then you can go to him. Another method is Ayurveda. Ayurveda, interestingly enough, in its